What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to be looking at the Summer Cup Ultra League Edition once again, and the team that we're going to be taking a look at today includes Lapras, Virizion, and Fortress. The reason we're running this team is because I found a lot of teams were very soft to Virizion, as I explained in the last video, and Fortress and Lapras just seem very neutral into the majority of the meta, and consistency is king in this meta, because even if you don't have good matchups, having that consistency is really important. So that's why I'm actually running Bug Bite on Fortress rather than Volt Switch, because that's either feast or famine if you run Volt Switch. But a couple other things you might notice on the screen is that I have Expert Trainer members on the left and Legend Trainer members on the right. We actually have our very first Legend Trainer member on this channel. He went straight all the way to Legend, skipped Expert entirely, and that is Big Burden. So a huge thank you to Big Burden and a huge shout out to him paving the way. I mean, he's first ever on this channel. I've never advertised members on this channel before because it's not something that I necessarily want to like ask for. I already have a full-time job. I make money. This has never been about money for me, but it is really nice to see people supporting me if they want to, and I appreciate that so much. So without further ado, let's hop right into some battles. Okay, hopping into the first match, we have Lapras into Trevenant. This is a tough lead because we are ABA weak to this Pokemon, except Lapras is kind of a beast. So we live a Seed Bomb no problem. This will only probably take us slightly below half HP. And that's exactly what it does. It does put us in the yellow, and then my opponent switches, and they switch into a Jellicent, and I do not have a good answer to Jellicent on this team. Virizion is my best response because we resist Surf at the very least, but we are not running Leaf Blade on the Virizion anymore. Stone Edge coverage is just way too useful in this meta, so I am forced to switch into my Virizion and go straight Stone Edge. I do want to land another Stone Edge so that I can at least Psywave down in this matchup, so I actually will commit a shield in this matchup, but this is already looking pretty bad. We've lost the lead, we've lost Switch, and somehow I have to find a way out of this matchup. We're also down a shield, so now we just have to let this go. It is the Shadow Ball. They do pick up the knockout. In comes the Lapras. I'm already at 100 energy, so I'm kind of just forced to throw this energy. So here comes a Sparkling Aria. Sparkling Aria will pick up the knockout, so we have at least neutralized the Jellicent on the safe switch, but in comes the Trevenant. We can actually make it to an Ice Beam here. Ice Beam is super effective damage, so my opponent will have to respect this, and they do. They do finally commit their first shield, and they actually let us get to a second Ice Beam, maybe trying to commit to the full farm down. The only problem here is I cannot get to another move, but that's okay because they let the second one go, not expecting me to make it to the Ice Beam, and it is a Drampa in the back, and Trampa, as a Dragon type, has resisted Dragon Breath damage here. They full send the Fly on the first, which is fantastic, because Swift is resisted, Dragon Breath is resisted, Fly is their only neutral damage. So I'm going to connect with the Rock Tomb, get the full farm down. My opponent let that go because they knew they didn't have a win con anymore, and they will resign the match. Into the first match, we have into the second match. Sorry, we have a Galvantula on the lead, and I stayed in to see what their fast move was because Lapras into that matchup isn't too bad if they're running Fury Cutter, but this one is on Volt Switch, so I'm going to come into my Virizion. Virizion does have super effective coverage with Stone Edge here, and they let that go, trying to call a bait. And I know 2 lunges don't KO because this is only neutral damage. It's super effective on grass, resisted on fighting. And even with those debuffs, we can actually still get a full double kick farmed out and come out loaded with energy. My opponent then comes in with a Blastoise. I unfortunately do not have Leaf Blade on my Virizion, so I'm going to connect with a Sacred Sword, and then I'm going to reset that debuff and switch into my Fortress. These Bug Bites are doing so much damage that I think if I double shield my Fortress, I can actually get the full farm down. So here comes a second Hydro Cannon, and that came pretty quick. So maybe I can't get the full farm down, but if they are going to make it to another move, I can just throw another Rock Tomb. Unfortunately, I ended up throwing on the CMP tie instead of one turn before. I was lagging quite a bit in these battles. I had like a matchup where I was getting like 7-turn Volt Switches when I was trying Volt Switch on Fortress. It was insane. Like, there was so much lag today. But here comes a Rock Tomb into the Cradily that comes back in. The Bug Bites are hitting for massive super effective damage, and I am able to snipe with the Virizion. I'm able to get to a Sacred Sword, And my opponent does have to throw because they cannot get the full farm down before I'm able to get to another Sacred Sword, which is huge. I can now come in with the Fortress. I actually get the full farm down. My opponent could have thrown there, but I would have been able to get the Sidewave farm down, so it didn't really matter. They're getting fast move farm down either way, and we are able to take that second win. Into next match, finally a decent lead for the Lapras, and it's actually a Skeledirge on Hex. So this is an okay matchup because Incinerate isn't adding up and doing as much damage. They do just go for a Torch Song there, and Torch Song without the Incinerate damage is pretty underwhelming, even though they do boost their attack. They are going to, of course, outpace me here because they're on Hex, but I know I can live 2 Torch Songs here. I could probably even live a Shadow Ball if they full sent it. I'm now going to go for a Sparkling Aria right before they make it to their 3rd Torch Song. And now I'm actually able to grab 2 shields from my opponent and get to another Sparkling Aria before my opponent can even pick up the knockout with 2 charge moves. So this is an extremely dominant matchup for the Lapras. They do get the full farm down, which is unfortunate, but I believe they're in 1 Bug Bite farm down range, so I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go for the Bug Bite. It goes through, but it doesn't quite KO, which is pretty unfortunate, but maybe 1 more after that will, and that's exactly what happens. So we do just have to concede 1 shield, and what's in the back? It's a Virizion. That Virizion farms up all the way to the Stone Edge, so I go for the catch onto my Virizion. Did we catch a Stone Edge? We did not. They baited with a Sacred Sword. That is unfortunate, or maybe they're not even running Stone Edge. We'll never know. But now they're just going to start spamming up these Sacred Swords. But they are staying in this matchup, which means they're likely weak to Virizion in the back. However, I'm going to commit to the Fortress because Fortress with a shield advantage and an energy advantage is going to be pretty good into pretty much everything imaginable. There's not much that it wouldn't be good into besides like Virizion, which we are in the mirror match with. So I'm going to instantly pivot, and it is an Ampharos in the back. I'm going to overfarm a little bit here, now going for the Earthquake. Earthquake will hit for massive super effective damage on this Ampharos. It puts them at 1 HP. I know I can live whatever this charge move is. Thunder Punch, Brutal Swing, doesn't matter. We're going to live it, get the full Bug Bite farm down. My opponent just resigns the match, and we are able to take that win. Into next match, Bellybolt on the lead. This is, of course, a tough lead, so I'm going to safe switch into my Fortress. And my opponent is actually just going to connect with a Parabolic Charge, and they're going to stay in this matchup, which is okay, because I'd rather have them in this matchup than in the matchup against the Lapras. But then, after buffing their defense, they immediately pivot out into a Roserade. So a bit of a strange play, and then they commit the shield on the very first Rock Tomb. So yes, this is a double super effective Weather Ball. They're going to outpace me 100%. So I will just let this go. Even with the debuff, it does pick up the knockout. And my opponent does have access to super effective Leaf Storm here, which would hit for massive super effective damage. So I do commit the shield. It is the Leaf Storm, but now their attack has harshly fallen. So I can just let the second one go. It will hurt a lot, but it will not be enough to KO. And I will come out loaded with energy. They actually only commit to a Weather Ball there, and we are able to get the full farm down. Back in comes the Bellybolt. Bellybolt will be met with a Sparkling Aria. Their defense is no longer boosted, so my opponent actually commits a shield. So now here comes a second Sparkling Aria, and now I'm going to make an absolutely devious play. I'm going to stay in for the rest of the Sucker Punches and then catch the next Parabolic Charge onto my Virizion. So none of this electric energy has hit my Lapras yet in this matchup, but my opponent has me triple hard countered. They have a Tentacruel in the back. So fortunately, we do have at least neutral coverage here with the Stone Edge, and they will have to full send a Sludge Wave in order to pick up the knockout, so I will just let this go. It is actually just a Scald, so now I can overfarm here. Just going to go for the Stone Edge as soon as I get to it, because I need to connect with this damage, and as soon as I do, I can come in with a Lapras. This is enough for a Sludge Wave here, so I will respect this damage, and it is a Sludge Wave, which is huge. I can overfarm here, throwing the Sparkling Aria right before my opponent is able to make it to another Parabolic Charge. That picks up the knockout. Back in comes the Tentacruel. We're going to Sidewave them a little bit more into range where we know a Sparkling Aria will pick up the knockout, and Lapras is able to sweep that game even though it was aligned against a Bellybolt. Into the next match, we've got Swampert on the lead. This is a neutral lead, but a dominant one for the Lapras because Lapras is just incredibly bulky, and it has just such great coverage and a neutral matchup here. So all we have to do is go for double Sparkling Aria, or maybe a Sparkling Aria plus an Ice Beam in order to pick up the knockout. It'll have to depend on how much these side waves are doing. My opponent actually is running Earthquake, and then they're going to pivot into a Golisopod. I, of course, don't have a fantastic answer for Golisopod, but I do have Fortress, and Fortress is bulky enough that it can take 2 neutral Aqua Jets without the threat of being KO'd, especially if your opponent is on Fury Cutter. But this opponent is on Shadow Claw. I can still live 2. It's not comfortable, but I still can live it. So now here comes a Rock Tomb. This is super effective damage, so my opponent might actually commit a shield here, and they do. But they will be forced to throw their energy, or else I will make it to another Rock Tomb. They try to commit to the farm down. They do not get it. So here comes another super effective Rock Tomb coming their way. My opponent commits the double shield and then resets on the Swampert and snipes, which would be a nice play if I didn't have Virizion in the back, which we know completely walls the Swampert. They're definitely going to be on Hydro Cannon. They're definitely going to be on Earthquake because we've already seen the Earthquake. So I'm going to overfarm pretty significantly in this matchup. Let them throw their energy. Go for a Sacred Sword here on good timing. I don't even really need to fully charge this. I'm just going to tap a few bubbles because I want to get at least one more double kick worth of energy. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Mud Shot's not very threatening, so but it is a Tentacruel in the back. We cannot escape this thing. I keep making teams that are kind of weak to it. I mean, I guess this team isn't really weak to it, but we have no charge move pressure on the Lapras and fast move pressure on the Fortress, even though they have no fast move pressure there, so kind of a neutral matchup. But I've got 2 shields. I've got to start using them. Hopefully my opponent is not on Acid Spray. They are on Scald. Do they get the debuff? No, that's huge, because now we can continue to Psywave this down, hoping that a Sparkling Aria is enough to KO. This has to be able to pick up the knockout. We cannot give them another shield. Plus the Psywave, it is enough to pick up the knockout. We come out with a Sparkling Aria loaded. Sparkling Aria from this range will pick up the knockout on the Golisopod, and once again able to take that win, even though my opponent had 2 water Pokemon completely walling our charge moves. Tough lead in the next match. We've got a Scizor on the lead. I'm going to safe switch into my Virizion. My opponent goes for a Sacred Sword catch onto their Palkia in the back, which is an absolutely crazy Pokemon to have, but I mean, maybe they just didn't have a Kingdra and wanted to run that. Of course, they're on Dragon Tail, which is also strange, because now here comes another Sacred Sword. Virizion is so spammy. They have to full send a Draco Meteor here in order to pick up the knockout, because an Aqua Tail will not be enough to KO. They just settle for the Aqua Tail. It's not enough to pick up the knockout. So we've already grabbed a shield in this matchup, and we're actually going to grab Switch in this matchup, which is pretty huge, because even if they come back with this Scizor, we now have alignment that we need. We've got Fortress on this. Of course, Bug Bite is resisted here on the steel typing of Scizor, but this is at least a more neutral matchup than the Lapras matchup, where our Psy Waves are resisted and they have super effective Trailblaze. That would not be good. At least this matchup, they're forced to go for non-stab Night Slashes. The only thing we have to worry about here is that they get a boost. Fortunately, we do have Rock Tomb in case they do get a boost to lower their attack back down, but they have not got one yet, so they're now at -1. Once that Rock Tomb connects, I know another Night Slash will not be enough to KO here. In fact, after that connects, I'm going to instantly pivot into my Lapras, and my opponent responds by pivoting into a Lapras of their own. It makes sense. They're double weak to fire on the lead. They kind of need a water type in the back. To be honest, I'm kind of surprised it's not a more dominant water type. Lapras, of course, takes neutral from fire damage, and things like Typhlosion could definitely cause that core a little bit of issues. That said, I will shield up the first move in case my opponent was running Skull Bash. They end up just going for a Sparkling Aria, and at this point, I can't shield again because I need to be able to shield a Trailblaze in case my opponent is able to make it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to instantly pivot into my Fortress, and I'm actually able to get a catch there, but it is just another Sparkling Aria, and my opponent throws right away once again. So I know this can only be a Sparkling Aria. My opponent has revealed that they do not have Skull Bash on their Lapras, which is huge. I now just have to shield up the Trailblaze, and once I shield this up, I can overfarm a little bit. They actually bait with a Night Slash, which means I can't overfarm as much, but I know my opponent is energy dry, so as soon as I have enough energy for more than one move, I know I'll be able to outpace, and they are deeper than I am, which is huge, because here comes a Sparkling Aria. This is resisted damage, but it will pick up the knockout, and we are able to take that win. Into the next match, we have Lapras into Venusaur. This seems like it should be a bad lead, obviously grass into water, but because we have Psywave and Ice Beam, this matchup actually isn't as bad as you'd think. Of course, they do outpace to the Frenzy Plant here, but Venusaur is glassy, so this is a matchup I feel pretty comfortable baiting in. and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Once I bait with a Sparkling Aria once, the pacing like differential becomes a little bit less clear in this matchup, and as soon as my opponent doesn't throw right away, I know I can just go for an Ice Beam. An Ice Beam is super effective damage. My opponent has to commit the double shield. I'm going to throw one Psywave, switch into my Virizion, and did we get the Frenzy Plant catch? We did. That is absolutely huge. And then my opponent pivots into a Golisopod. Golisopod will be able to throw their energy right away. I'm hoping it's not an Aerial Ace. It is just the X-Scissor. And now here comes a super effective Stone Edge. Stone Edge will hit for massive damage in this matchup, and it actually puts them deep into the red, enough to the point where a Sacred Sword will actually be able to pick up the knockout from this range, I believe. So just going to go for the Sacred Sword. That picks up the knockout, so we have switch advantage. They come back in with a Venusaur. I'm going to pivot into my Fortress right away, expecting my opponent not to have a fire in the back. And if they did, I would have super effective coverage for it. But no, it's a Jellicent in the back. So this problem Pokemon once again showing up. But because they have given us an energy lead, here comes a Rock Tomb to debuff their attack. They farm up past the Shadow Ball, which actually allows me to throw my next Rock Tomb. I end up throwing on the CMP tie, winning the CMP tie, which is huge. And now that their attack is double debuffed, I'm more than comfortable letting this go. Shadow Ball really doesn't do that much damage there. And now I'm going to try and take the rest of this energy on Lapras. I know Shadow Ball on a bulky Lapras will not do that much damage. Look at how little that does. And now we're going to try and Psywave them down into a range where we can pick up the knockout with the Sparkling Aria. My opponent makes a pretty nice play. They snipe with the Venusaur, but unfortunately, all that does is allow me to get the full Psywave farm down, come out with back-to-back moves loaded. I wasn't sure if they were quite in Ice Beam range, so I am just going to go for the safer play, going for the double Sparkling Aria. And from this range in the deep red, Sparkling Aria will be able to pick up the knockout on the Jellicent, even though my opponent seems to have Rage Quit, and we are able to take that win. Into next match, we've got Lapras into Virizion. Once again, a matchup that seems like it would be a negative one, but I've seen these in The Sims. If you bait with Sparkling Aria, I believe you actually outpace to the second charge move, and 2 Leaf Blades are enough to KO. My opponent actually ends up going for a catch onto their own Lapras, and I'm going to pivot into my Fortress. Fortress, of course, resists the Psywave damage from the Lapras, and we have super effective Rock Tomb coverage, which will hit for some pretty massive damage, and these Bug Bites are adding up. Of course, this would be a matchup where it would be nice to have Volt Switch, but it's okay that we're on Bug Bite. Bug Bite is still doing pretty massive damage here. And second Sparkling Aria will be able to connect. That actually looks like it will not two-shot, so I could let this go, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to let this go. I'm going to build up to a Rock Tomb and then pivot into my Virizion. My opponent actually has Golisopod in the back, and I'm going to respect an Aerial Ace here. I did get caught off guard a couple times with it, and now I'm going to go for a bit of a risky play. I'm going to go for a Sacred Sword bait. I've farmed up past the Stone Edge. I'm hoping my opponent respects it, and they do, which is huge. But now here comes another charge move, and this charge move is enough for the Stone Edge. Does my opponent respect the damage? They do. That is unfortunate. My opponent commits both shields. I know I can live an X-Scissor here, and my opponent will actually be forced to throw in order to pick up the knockout. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to snipe with a Rock Tomb. This is super effective damage, and this is why we stored it for later, because that coverage on Fortress is super nice. And now, because we stored an Ice Beam on the Lapras, we can now snipe the Virizion, and we are able to connect with massive super effective damage. Can they make it to back-to-back moves? They cannot, and my opponent knows that was their only win con, so they just resigned the match. Into next match, another Trevenant. Are you kidding me? Why is this thing everywhere? Probably just hunting the Virizions, I suppose. It is a complete wall, but believe it or not, this is not a bad matchup for the Lapras. Lapras knows no bad matchup. It is truly the king of consistency. They end up pivoting into a Kingdra, and sorry opponent, you cannot safe switch a Kingdra when I have a Fortress in the back. We are a Steel type, we resist the Dragon Breath. Oh, imagine if I was still running my XL Whimsicott. That would be huge. They'd be completely walled, and their Dragon Breath would be doing even less damage because they'd be double resisted. But this is still an extremely dominant matchup for the Fortress. I'm able to connect with a Rock Tomb, pick up the knockout, and now I'm able to get to a Rock Tomb against the Trevenant as well. And these Bug Bites are doing so much damage that my opponent is actually forced to throw energy. They're deep in the red from the Bug Bites and the Rock Tomb alone, and they couldn't farm me down. So in comes comes the Lapras. It is an Ursaring in the back. I had not seen an Ursaring up until this point, but now here comes a Sparkling Aria. Once we grab that shield, I'm instantly going to pivot into my Virizion. I do not want to give them too much energy. If they close combat right away, so be it. I'll win this game instantly. So they do have to go for a Swift, because close combat wouldn't be enough to KO, I believe, and then they would have lowered their defense, and double kicks would be doing so much damage. They're already doing so much damage in this matchup, and we already outpace. And now I just have to watch for a catch here. Does my opponent go for it? There they go. They go for it then. I realized I couldn't farm down, so I end up throwing energy there, but this is only enough for a Seed Bomb, so I know I can let this go. Sacred Sword, even though it is double resisted, will be able to pick up the knockout on the Trevenant from this range, and then we're only one double kick away from another Sacred Sword, and Sacred Sword is super effective on the Glassy Shadow Ursaring, so we'll be able to pick up the knockout, and we are able to take that win. So yeah, that is my newly built Lapras for the Ultra League. This thing is so good, and I totally understand the hype. I definitely want to build one for the Great League. I still don't have one with good IVs, and I don't really want to build one that doesn't have good IVs, because bulk is really important on this Pokemon, and that's where IVs kind of come into play, is when you have those bulky Pokemon. So I'm kind of holding off still on the Great League one, but I had a decent one for the Ultra League, so I decided to build it up, and it was totally worth it. I've been grinding this thing for a few days. If you tuned into my stream the other day, I kind of talked about it there, but I will be probably trying to do a stream sometime next week. I'm thinking Tuesday. We'll have to see, depending on my schedule. And once again, thank you to Big Burden for being the first member. I really appreciate it. Super cool. I never thought I'd get there, so I really do appreciate it. But yeah, that's going to be it for me from this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, peace.